There comes a point in every gaming content creator's career where they must talk about the Souls games. Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring. I have never beaten a Souls game, despite having cumulatively poured well over 100 hours into them over a decade, pinballing between the poles of triumphant victory and overwhelming defeat. There is no more controversial series in the history of video games. It's a seemingly niche genre of game that somehow keeps wrangling in more people with each new release. The first one I played significantly was 2015 PlayStation exclusive Bloodborne. I was in a serious relationship with my then girlfriend, current wife, and soon-to-be mother of a baby girl. She was in the process of buying a house. My wife, myself, and her father were all there getting the house in order, at which point he said to me,
"Gee, we could do some pretty lengthy projects together now, Scott."
I didn't know whether or not he was joking, but my sheer terror of having to sacrifice the comforts of gamer time for touching grass with my soon-to-be father-in-law gave 2015 me a directive. I must play and beat Bloodborne. I got all the way to Cainhurst Castle and rage quit after 20 unsuccessful boss attempts. Cainhurst Castle is an optional area. In August of 2022, YouTuber Sean posted to his Twitter, quote, "A large part of why the Dark Souls series is popular is that it is one of the few works of art produced under capitalism to tap into what it feels like to live under capitalism. I shall not elaborate," end quote. I have thought about this tweet at least once a week since he posted it. It is on the surface an obvious statement. The Souls games are some of the most popular and acclaimed video games of the 21st century, sure, but they also have a reputation for being extremely difficult, needlessly punishing, and relentlessly cruel. I can't tell you how many times the euphoria I felt after beating a boss after my 20th try, my heart racing faster than my grandfather's before his triple bypass surgery, only to encounter yet another wall of stuckness soon after. If life is a game we must choose to play, then Elden Ring is the simulacrum of everything you've learned as a gamer. From Software games aim to teach lessons via infinitely replayable loops. It can oftentimes feel obtuse and cruel, but the enemies always spawn in the same location, with the same predictable attack patterns. Once you get a Souls game, you realize you don't have to constantly nervous dodge away from bosses, draining your stamina meter. No, once you get good, you can swagger walk your way to a boss, parry him, and insta-murder him, and hardly break a sweat in the process. Problem is, getting good at Elden Ring is like learning a new skill in the real world. It takes time, commitment, and if you're on a tight schedule, YouTube guides. But more on that later. The thesis of every Souls game is becoming comfortable in a hostile environment. You do that about 30 times in Demon Souls, 60 times in Dark Souls, and 300 times in Elden Ring, and there you go. You've gotten good. Congratulations. Except it ain't that easy. To keep this video mercifully short, I aim to only talk in detail about Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Elden Ring to illustrate my point. Elden Ring released in 2022 amidst a tsunami of anticipation. It won Game of the Year at Jeff Keighley's prestigious Game Awards, an award ceremony which aims to model itself after the Oscars with each passing year. The moment was punctuated with an, at least to me, hilarious bit of randomness when a Jewish comedian casually walked on stage with Hidetaka Miyazaki to receive the award for Game of the Year.
Real quick, I want to thank everybody and say that I think I want to nominate this award to my Reformed Orthodox Rabbi, Bill Clinton. Thank you, everybody.
So how did Elden Ring become the one to secure such high critical acclaim, and why did it become the one that sold astronomically Grand Theft Auto numbers? Isn't this an obtuse game series that is trying to do the thing that games like The Legend of Zelda and Dragon Quest have done better? This is my subjective opinion, but man, Breath of the Wild feels like a baby's toy next to Elden Ring, bro. It is not only FromSoft's first stab at an open world game, but the characters and world were written by George R.R. Martin, famed author of the monumentally influential Game of Thrones. Elden Ring introduces the prestigious HBO Shin to the Souls series. Elden Ring looks to be Dragon Quest and The Legend of Zelda in a post-death reality, where all but the faintest of hope has vanished into a microscopic particle so tiny it can't even be seen by a human eye, only a tarnished one. Disgusting conservative and liberal tyrants litter the lands between, refusing to go away. They linger long after their death, scarlet rot rotting their already rotted brains, selfishly holding on to whatever lifeless grip they still have. Dragon Quest plays out in the grand tradition of having the hero acquire a diverse party over the course of a 30 to 100 hour campaign to save the world. The Legend of Zelda is a solo campaign through various elemental worlds in order to save a princess. Elden Ring is about both of these things after the end of the world has already occurred. The Tarnished must embark on their journey without a party, but that doesn't mean that they are alone. You must seek the help of those who still can, those who have been forced into hiding from this cruel world. Spirit guides can be summoned to your aid during the most punishing of boss battles. Merchants can be befriended so you can buy game-changing items. A blacksmith forges you stronger weapons, but only if you have the courage to find the smithing stones necessary for upgrades. Elden Ring does not boast the traditionally tight and compact gameplay of The Legend of Zelda. It is something much heavier, grounded, and cinematic. Obnoxious gatekeepers will emphasize the game's supposed mastery of reflexes, but nothing could be further from the truth in practice. You don't have to possess Call of Duty reflexes in order to triumph in Elden Ring. My first playthrough was as a mage, a no-touching run, so to speak. My goal was to create as much space as possible between myself and my enemy, and then spam the same 3 to 5 magic spells over the course of a luxuriously dense 100 hours. A lot of this method, surprisingly, got me to the end of the game. Elden Ring's genius shows itself quite early on. You don't have to follow the main path, and even better, you don't even have to kill any of the hundreds of optional bosses. Heck, you don't even have to tackle any of the endless optional dungeons. All you need is a curiosity for exploration, and the rest will sort itself out. Early in my Mage playthrough, I found myself in an area that felt like it should be forbidden to enter. The apocalyptically doom-inspired third level of Caelid. Dragons and poisonous swamps litter Caelid, and yet you can rush past all of it to find not only an incredibly powerful staff, but also one of its most powerful spells. The Meteorite Staff is great because it doesn't require the player to go through the hassle of finding smithing stones to upgrade. The staff is already as upgraded as it's going to get. Even better, the more you level your intelligence, the more the staff scales with your damage power. Rocksling has the added benefit of staggering a good number of even late-game bosses, making it, along with the Glintstone Pebble, a phenomenal choice for your entire playthrough. This is the beauty of Elden Ring's game design. You might lose your souls permanently when you die twice, but any weapon, shield, armor, spell, memory slot, etc. that you find stays with you permanently. So just let go of the idea of having to hold on to your souls, because you don't have to. But at some point, you're going to have to learn how to fight. Looking and moving are the two primary verbs in any Souls games, and you will need to master both, not only in your exploration, but also with the bosses. Because there are some real in Elden Ring. While many people will say Elden Ring is the most accessible Souls game, the sheer number of customization means that there will be some bosses you will have to bang your head against. The Lord of Blood Moog is an example of a boss that forces you to change up your playstyle. He does a move mid-fight which not only saps your entire health bar, but heals him back up in the process. There are two ways I found to deal with this. You can brute force your way through the fight, which I was almost able to do by spamming your health flasks once he initiates this cheap attack, but doing so renders you flaskless. I was nearly able to execute an incredibly exploitative attempt at casting Common Azure in order to eliminate the rest of his health bar as he was trying to siphon my blood. My hope was that the endless barrage of Common Azure would stunlock him, rendering him unable to pull off the move. The Common Azure spell is already legendary for being grotesquely overpowered, but it comes with a catch. The amount of time needed in order to cast a spell is so significant that it's rendered useless unless you can get a window of at least 3 seconds in which the enemy is not only stationary, but not attacking you. My Mimic Tear wasn't able to hold on for much longer, so even though I got his health down to a quarter, I was unable to outlast Moog. But there is another surefire way, the Blood Bubble Physic. The Blood Bubble negates Moog's attempts at siphoning your blood, making this fight immensely less challenging. And I had this ability the entire time without realizing it, which is either sad or hilarious depending on your mood. But again, this is the genius of Elden Ring. It rewards you so much for exploring, so much that you might earn a weapon or spell you can't even use, only to realize way later on that you're now properly equipped to use it. Once I beat Moog, I was fairly confident I could critical path my way to the end of the game and see credits. I was going to do it. I was finally going to beat my first Souls game. But playing Elden Ring and beating Elden Ring are two completely different mindsets. The final bosses are a dual gauntlet. First, you must take down Radagon, who's tough enough on his own, and then you must defeat the Elden Beast with depleted health and magic flasks. After over 30 tries, I rage quit Elden Ring, similarly to how I rage quit Bloodborne 10 years prior. There was something colossal I was missing. I sunk close to 70 hours into this game. I leveled my no-touching mage to level 170. How could I still be this much of a chump where I couldn't even whittle down Elden Beast's health to half? I got depressed. I thought about how, despite Elden Ring's greatness, open-world game design has demanded too much from us. I was so excited to see what FromSoft was going to do after Sekiro and Bloodborne, but did we need FromSoft to make an open-world RPG? I realized for a decent percentage of my playthrough, I wasn't having a great time. I allowed Gatekeepers to make me feel like garbage because I decided to use Spirit Ashes. Is this acceptable? Is it on me? I'm already expected to give so much of my time and attention to longer forms of content. Podcasts, movies, TV shows, 6-hour video essays. How far should it go? So in a stressed out fit of shame and insecurity, I chose to return to the first one I ever tried.
Dark Souls.
Hey, hi, hello. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. Will I be able to beat a Souls game before the end of it? Keep watching to find out. Now, back to the show. Part 2. I must admit I wasn't always a fan of these games. After I tried and failed miserably against the Bell Gargoyles in October of 2011, I had a coworker laugh at me, informing me that I had barely begun to scratch the surface of scratching the surface of the game. His comment annoyed me, so I started to view Souls games as if they were weapons for elite gamers, quite bitterly, I might add, or at least people who thought themselves to be elite gamers. There is a rather hostile and unpleasant community of Souls fans who take the games extremely seriously. They are quick to judge those who use methods they deem inappropriate, like summoning spirit ashes, or looking up guides, or exploiting a soul farming technique. All things the game designers left in the game to, encourage the player to keep trucking onward. I've often wondered why these gatekeepers enforce such strict rules, especially when they haven't designed the game. While it's true that suffering can make you a stronger person, there is also the reality that seeking out too much suffering can make you a miserable, insufferable person. Working class people who don't have a lot of free time on their hands will hear about the games and their reputation, and if they're unlucky like me, have coworkers who are more concerned with their soul's expertise than trying in good faith to earnestly recommend the series. The online component of the Souls games put me off as well, because my experience with online competitive shooters like Call of Duty turned me off to online gaming entirely. But my generalization was wrong in this case. While online Souls can be trolly, it's done in a fun and friendly masochistic way. Let me explain. The online component works by allowing the player to read messages scrawled on the ground throughout the world. For example, you could be running down a straight hallway leading up to a fork that goes both left and right. You read a note left by a real player which reads, "Be wary of left." Now, you can interpret this one of two ways. You can either take the advice, go left, and see an enemy there lurking in ambush. Or you can go left, notice there is nothing there waiting for you, only for some bloke to Pearl Harbor you from behind. Most of the time, the notes are well-intentioned and helpful. In 1996, PlayStation 1 owners had Wild Arms to hold them over until Final Fantasy VII. In 2009, PlayStation 3 owners had Demon Souls as we waited for Final Fantasy XIII to disappoint us all in 2010. The year after that, we got Dark Souls. If there's one game that bludgeoned its way to the top of the zeitgeist in the 2010s, it was Dark Souls. Released in October of 2011, Dark Souls changed the landscape of video games forever. We wouldn't see its influence immediately. We still had to course through the growing pains of online service shooters like Destiny and single-player prestige adventures like The Last of Us and Red Dead Redemption 2. Dark Souls was a return to Nintendo hard difficulty, but with better graphics and the length of a JRPG. Demon Souls may have been the first Souls game, but it didn't have the luxury of releasing on 2 consoles like its multi-platform younger brother. I'd only briefly mention Demon Souls to illustrate its ingenious first level, 1-1. A level that deserves to be held in the same esteem as Super Mario's 1-1 or Doom's E1-M1. Demon Souls is a game that models itself after the level selection freedom of Mega Man, but first you must beat level 1-1. At the beginning of the level, you can instantly turn around, earning yourself 2 late grass healing items. The game wants you to succeed. It teaches you so many lessons. Patience is the most important lesson to learn in the Souls games. Dark Souls online messages are good, but Demon Souls messages have a sharp, playful wit to them. Every time you enter through the fog of a new area, you're entering into a new server area of the game, with a fresh batch of messages of places you were previously in. It just makes the game feel more alive. Who needs a party of 4 when you're able to hang out and read other Souls players' stressed out warnings? I chose the privileged royalty class this time because they start with the devastating Soul Echo spell that makes enemies scream in pain as they die. I'd unlocked both shortcuts in Boletaria only to forget to pull the lever that opens the massive boss door that stares you down in the distance when you start the level. Not only was there a helpful message near the lever reminding the player to use it, there's an incredible message waiting for you if you forget to pull the lever and aimlessly backtrack your way to the start of the level.
Welcome to the party.
Dark Souls is more of a spiritual successor to Demon Souls than a sequel. The infinite amount of healing items is replaced with limited Estus flasks that can only be recharged at bonfires, the game's version of Resident Evil's safe rooms. The Mega Man level selection from Demon Souls is replaced with a Simon's Questian interconnected world of intensely gratifying shortcuts. Demon Souls has some nice shortcuts, but Dark Souls expands this concept so majestically that it makes you glad you spent so much time and effort getting lost in the Spencer Mansion all the way back in 1996. Resident Evil walked so Dark Souls could run. On the top left of the screen are 2 bars, a health bar and a stamina bar. Health is pretty self-explanatory, but the stamina bar is what separates Souls combat from other action games. Once you've chosen to attack, you've committed to an attack. The player is vulnerable during this swinging animation. Not only that, but your stamina bar begins to drain. Keep attacking and your stamina bar will soon be empty. When it's time to defend, both dodging and blocking use up stamina. If the enemy whacks your shield, your health bar will be good, but stamina takes a hit. Blocking with the shield won't drain your stamina alone, but it will slow the process of filling it back up if you're holding the button down. So the player must choose not only when to attack and when to block, but when to recharge stamina and when to use stamina. It might seem a bit tricky at first, but understanding this give and take forces the player to become more patient. Poor Souls play usually means impatient play. Bloodborne would subvert this mechanic in 2015, but I don't have time to get into that right now. When I first played Dark Souls in October of 2011, I spent most of my 6 hours with the game in the Undead Burg. I gave up entirely during the Bell Gargoyle encounter. The gargoyles will be the most difficult early challenge for most new players. I had no idea how to summon Solier, nor did I even know how. All I knew how to do was grind souls to level up my guy, but that wasn't enough to succeed. The Souls games will only reward you if you play with curiosity. Spirit guides are a crazy useful way to help you navigate the more challenging areas of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. In the former, the undead champion meets Solier, a man obsessed with the sun. You can summon him to help you fight the Bell Gargoyles. The battle begins against a single gargoyle, but once you knock its health to half, another one appears. However, this second gargoyle only has a half a bar of health. So the game is indicating to you that this fight will have to be earned, but that it won't be impossible. And summoning Solier greatly evens the odds. He doesn't hit hard, but he provides enough of a distraction that the fight becomes a tag team brawl, more reminiscent of Turtles in Time than an obtuse Japanese role-playing game. Dark Souls was the game that made me want to learn how to parry, kick, and backstab. Sekiro would make parrying the focal point of the combat, but it's mostly optional in Dark Souls. Pulling it off early can be tricky, but mastering the kick and backstab should be enough to get you through most of the game. You'll be dealing with a lot of dudes with massive shields in the Undead Burg. Strafing behind them is a good way of dealing with them quickly, but an even quicker way is to backstab them. Backstabbing requires the player to strafe behind, lower the shield, and then press the right bumper in order to execute a grotesquely satisfying QuickTime event. But there's another way to deal with the shield guys from the front. While it may seem counterintuitive at first, you can kick away shields by simultaneously flicking the left analog stick upwards and hitting the right trigger button. Mastering these techniques won't do you much good against the Capra Demon, however. The Capra Demon is infamous in Dark Souls for being a cheap boss fight inside a claustrophobic battle arena. Even better, he's joined by 2 companion dogs that will inflict bleed on the player. And even better than all of that, you can't use summons in this fight. Kicking and backstabbing won't do you much good here because you're immediately overwhelmed by 3 enemies charging towards you. There are 2 things going in your favor. 1, the stairs, and 2, you should be high enough of a level now to take the dogs out in one hit. The challenge comes in knowing where to stand, when to run, and when to attack. I had 2 goals in mind when returning to Dark Souls after getting so mercilessly humbled in Elden Ring. Ring the Bells of the Undead Parish and Blighttown, the first half of the game. It was going to feel triumphantly satisfying getting revenge on all the times I died in the Undead's Burg and Parish. And boy, did it ever. I sliced through the opening hours of Dark Souls like it was melted butter. I was finally getting it. I felt so confident that I released a 2.5 hour tutorial called How to Master the Opening Hours of Dark Souls. I should have ended my time with Dark Souls here, but I didn't. I had never made it to Blighttown until this particular playthrough. I'd heard all the common complaints about the level, that it's obtusely unfair, how easy it is to become poisoned and cursed, but I've played through the sewer level of Resident Evil 2. I've played enough JRPGs to know when to use an antidote to cure poison status. I had a curse box, and I had purple moss to negate all of that. But hearing about Blighttown and experiencing Blighttown firsthand are 2 completely different entities. I got so humbled in Blighttown after a few short visits that the Elden Beast suddenly didn't seem so bad by comparison. Then the despair came flooding back. My confidence was shattered again. I don't know if this is truly the case, but I felt like I was soft-locked out of this playthrough. I was stuck in Blighttown. Well, technically I was stuck in the depths. I couldn't even make it to the Blighttown bonfire, and I couldn't find a way back up above ground to repair my Drake sword, and I hadn't pumped anything into my base level swords before arrogantly deciding to take the plunge. But as defeated as I felt, I knew I still had a choice, and that choice felt incredibly liberating. I finally knew which Souls game I was going to beat first. The first one ever made. Demon Souls. Demon Souls opens the floodgates after level 1-1, giving you 5 choices of where to go next. Do you want to venture on to level 1-2, or do you choose to poke your head in one of the game's other 4 worlds? You might feel like a master after overcoming Demon Souls' first level, but you're gonna have to learn new weapon types if you want any hope of making damage in this game. Demon Souls is a good choice for first-time Souls players because it primes the player to get used to navigating the menus and changing your weapons. And the Royalty Mage is a great class because you can still choose to make a strength or dex build and also have the ability to so echo your enemies into oblivion. I chose to beat Demon Souls for this video because it reminds me not of Dragon Quest or The Legend of Zelda, but one of the games I loved growing up, Mega Man. Mega Man 2 specifically. Like Demon Souls, the Blue Bomber can choose which level and boss to tackle in any order he wishes. Wait, do we still call Mega Man the Blue Bomber? I don't know. Something about Mega Man doesn't sit right with me. I got a lot more to say about Mega Man. Hear more about it when I review Alan Wake 2, coming March of 2025. Anyway, back to the show. This not only allows you to dip your toes into each level, the freedom of choice also allows you to determine which route is optimal for you. For example, many fans suggest starting with Metal Man because his metal blades are the most OP weapon in the game. So if you earn the metal blades early, you'll have a distinct advantage. The core mechanic becomes less about exploration and more about discovery of exploits via fast-paced Nintendo gameplay. Mega Man isn't about perfect play, it's about moving forward at all costs. Enemies respawn, for staying in one spot and killing the same enemies won't get you very far. Prime Mega Man play is knowing when to take a hit, but to keep trucking forward regardless. While I wouldn't recommend beating World 4-1 first, I would definitely recommend dipping in to acquire some essential weapons that'll have you slicing through the game like Guts in Berserk. The Crescent Falchion +1 can be found here, if you're able to withstand the early barrage of late-game common enemies. None of Demon Souls levels have checkpoints, only shortcuts. But like Elden Ring and Dark Souls, any weapon you pick up will forever be yours. The Crescent Falchion is Demon Souls' version of the Meteorite Staff or Drake Sword, a dangerously powerful, non-upgradable weapon you can acquire early on and use for the rest of the game. World 2 in particular teaches you weapon diversity. The Falchion works great here, but there's another weapon that you'll be glad to have on hand. The common enemies here are not only weak to the Falchion's magic, they are also vulnerable to the spear. And even better, the spear is the perfect weapon to use in tight hallways, which World 2 has a bunch of. There are 2 essential tactics I wish I knew before facing World 2's boss, the Flame Beast. First, he is weak to the Falchion. Second, the fight is far easier when not locking on. You've probably discerned by now that larger enemies like dragons are easier to take on without the lock-on, but the Flame Beast is only slightly bigger than you. Locking on magnetizes his deadly fire damage. I have died to this boss more than any boss in the Souls games. But if you have the Falchion and don't lock on for the entire fight, you should be able to take him down after a few tries. I was finally able to take him down when I first played Demon Souls in the spring of 2021. I was even able to defeat the Archstone boss of Stonefang, but the game felt like a war of attrition by then. I have a peculiar habit of putting down a Souls game entirely after beating a difficult boss, because I can't bear to suffer through another wall of inevitable despair. But if I'm going to beat Demon Souls, I'm gonna have to persevere. I found an incredibly useful soul farming area at the beginning of the Ritual Path, level 4-2. Killing the Grim Reaper in this zone will net you at least 4,000 souls. Whenever I felt defeated, I returned to this area and grinded for a few minutes to accumulate souls, not just for leveling up, but for more arrows, more healing grass, or whatever else I might need. I decided to level both dexterity and strength to level 30 so I could wield the Dragon Bone Smasher sword. A sword I barely used, but had an incredibly fun time in the short amount of time I spent using it. I had started as a royalty mage, but now my character was so versatile that I found myself bringing a bow, a massive sword, a mace, and a dagger to every fight, and it felt amazing. Equipping the right rings in Demon Souls was the final puzzle I needed. Having the Thief Ring equipped in World 4 will keep those flying enemies from attacking you. It also helps tremendously during the old hero fight. The Cling Ring is found in level 1-1, negating the rather brutal reality that Demon Souls expects you to play most of the game with half of a health bar. And the Sodden Ring is essential for navigating the infamous Miyazaki swamps of World 5-2, the butthole of Demon Souls. Honestly, I could make an entire video essay about this level alone. Maybe I'll talk about it more soon. How it primes the player for Blighttown in Dark Souls, how it teaches you to use items other than the healing grass to offset poison. Compare this to something like Returnal, another critically acclaimed action game with passive RPG mechanics. But whereas Demon Souls oftentimes feels rewarding, Returnal dishes out its rewards much slower, requiring much more in the way of nimble Call of Duty-like reflexes. In preparation for this video, I returned to Returnal with one goal in mind: to beat the first biome. I gave myself a 3-hour time limit, the perfect time limit for any gaming session, whether that be an 80-hour JRPG, a short story game, or a punishing roguelike. And mostly, I just felt stressed out after my 3 hours with Returnal. I didn't feel closer to my goal, nor did I feel any particular interest in achieving that goal. All due respect to the game and its creators, but Returnal feels like a game that was made by someone who would wear a tie to the Game Awards.
You're gonna wear a god-darn tie at a video game awards ceremony? At the very least, don't wear a tie. Also, the tie makes the waist of his pants look too low.
Demon Souls invites the player to chill with it. Returnal actively hates the player. I know comparison is the thief of joy, but Demon Souls is just a far better user experience in my opinion. Only one of these games made me want to get better. I had just enough confidence to believe I could pull off what I thought was impossible. In October of 2011, I played my first Souls game. 13 years, 2 months, and 67 days later, I was finally able to do it. That's approximately 4,800 days. Since then, I have gotten promoted to manager. I have quit that same job. I have gotten married. I have helped create a child. I have thought about ending my life numerous times. I have thought about everything that is wonderful about my life even more times. I have been sober from painkillers since August of 2020, and now I can proudly say I've beaten a Souls game. When I was stuck on the Flame Lurker in the early spring of 2021, I was a miserable person. My wife was on the phone with her mother, who had just lost her sister due to hospital neglect. Instead of being present for my mother-in-law and my wife, I was perched on the living room couch, impatiently banging my head against a stupid video game boss I didn't have the patience to understand. I prayed to a god I knew didn't exist, pleading with him that if he just allowed me to overcome this horrific roadblock, I'd forever be grateful for the remaining life I have left. I remember making this same wager when I was so constipated on pain medication that I was on, not because I needed it, but because I was a drug addict. I was on all fours, sprawled out on the floor of my childhood home, my parents in the house having no idea what I was going through. Please just relieve me of this suffering, and I will forever be grateful for all the pain and suffering I have endured in this world. Not only that, I will stop being selfish and give up Vicodin cold turkey. Give me what I want, and I will never be miserable again. I swear to God. This is desire, and you're never going to capture desire. When I finally beat Demon Souls, I felt the same wave of euphoria and relief I did after defeating the Flame Lurker and finally being able
To take a dump.
And then I felt nothing. Life kept moving on. I was bored because what is life without suffering and the challenge of overcoming that very suffering? Late capitalism both atomizes and fragments us as individuals. Its endless impositions to earn money for yourself at the expense of everything else has made us frustrated, alienated, and defeated. We're supposed to be our highest selves, and yet we're shattered into so many different selves. The resentful people pleaser who politely listens to the arrogant egos around her. The absent-minded man who weaponizes his incompetence in the justification of being a breadwinner, or the wage worker who is so focused on toiling away that they don't even have the time to think about who they are or what they want. In philosophy, there is a difference between being and becoming. As Jonas Tchaikovsky puts it in his book Philosophizing with a Hammer, quote, "Why did Nietzsche associate being with slave morality? Because the slavish are weak and impotent, incapable of facing up to the actual world of everyday experience, a world of constant flux and eternal change. They find this unpredictability and motion frightening, so they conjure up another realm, a realm of being, as opposed to the everyday world of becoming," end quote. In my goal to beat a Souls game for this video, I was operating under slave morality. I thought I could achieve becoming as a feeling, as a state of being. I wasn't taking joy in the discovery of the richness of Hidetaka Miyazaki and his team's life-affirming work. I was trying to fulfill an instrumental goal instead of an intrinsic one. Quote, "When the painter paints, it is not as if the activity is entirely instrumental, as if the only final result is valuable and the act of painting is a mere means, which would be bypassed if possible. Rather, the act itself, just as much as the finished painting, is valuable in itself. The painting is enjoyed to the utmost in its very process of becoming," end quote. I painstakingly consulted Fighting Cowboy's Demon Souls guide on YouTube in order to artificially accelerate my playthrough. I had a good time playing Demon Souls, a great time even, but I was doing so I could prove something to myself. But also, had I not forced this goal onto myself, who knows if I would have ever had the nerve to beat one of these games. But more on that at the end. There is a flourishing online community of YouTube content creators like Fighting Cowboy who are able to post guides as a full-time job. It goes to show just how much the world has changed and how late capitalism has created this new need of stuck Souls players with a limited amount of time on their hands. These guides are working class. They take probably 80-hour work weeks to complete. And this video essay I'm making takes me a lot of time and effort to complete, regardless of what you think of the quality. I'm working 12 to 14 hour work days to get this video done, all in the hopes that I can eventually do this full time. But that hope, that dream is again a trap of being, of thinking I'm going to escape Plato's cave and reach the outside world of transcendence and a 6-figure bank account, and perhaps a Twitch partnership and various YouTube sponsorships. Because each time I post a video, I naively hope this will be the one that'll do it. I'll never have to work a real job again. But I've realized that being a successful content creator is about slowly doing the reps and slowly getting better, all the while deriving enjoyment out of the process when you can. and I might have to return to the job market while doing this. The weight of this reality is something I've tried running away from when making these videos. There is an intense fear that if I do end up gaining a part-time job, my soul will be drained like before, and I won't have the time to keep making these videos. Capitalism demands of me right now to fracture myself between a content creator, a worker, a husband, a son, and a soon-to-be father. But Nietzsche had a theory called the eternal return. The eternal return is an endless process of becoming. It seeks to affirm everything from the past as not only necessary, but good. Quoting Jonas again, when one exercises amor fati, love of fate, the past is retroactively affirmed as fulfilling its purpose of leading up to the present moment. It is called the eternal return because all eternity was needed to produce this one event. The eternal return is the tragic optimist's choice. Two examples, one deeply serious, the other not so much. Divorce is something deeply tragic because it exposes the farce that was a failed marriage. As awful as divorce is, there is a truth in it, that every marriage that ends in divorce was doomed from the start. But the marriage can be redeemed in a divorce in which each party is able to go their own separate ways and to grow as people. I'll be talking more about this when I talk about 2021's Game Awards Game of the Year, It Takes Two, coming soon. The other example is more silly. In the mid-90s, pro wrestling was arguably at its lowest in popularity and cultural cachet. The characters were all too campy, no longer entertaining to either adults or children. But out of this disconnect, the Attitude Era was born. Massive stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mick Foley transcended their previously limited roles and began to appeal to disillusioned fans once again. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson became the most universally beloved good guy only after he started calling wrestling fans trailer trash. The Attitude Era took every failure and ironically redeemed it by affirming what pro wrestling had been so desperately missing. I don't feel normal. Like most people, I try to mask my personality so as to make it more palatable. But in doing this, I cheat not only myself, but the people in my life who don't get to see me as I see myself. But how do I see myself? I have incredibly low self-esteem, even after beating a Souls game. I feel as though I started this crazy career path of a YouTuber too late. It makes me feel icky, not only as a cog in the capitalist machine, but as a man. I oftentimes feel worthless to my family and friends, and to even complete strangers. My shame in currently not making any money has irreparably damaged my already fragile ego. I am no longer a people pleaser with a superpower to make miserable people temporarily happy. I am a free man who constantly feels lost. A man who is tired of surviving according to some predetermined essentialist path of breadwinning. I want to create more than I want to make money, and yet I cannot continue this YouTube channel full time until it begins earning me money. The 1997 anime adaptation of Berserk opens each episode with an unnamed narrator asking, quote, "Is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God hovering above? At least it is true that man has no control, even over his own will." None of us were asked to be born into this utopian hellscape of endless consumption and production, and yet here we are. And here I am, still thinking about YouTuber Sean's tweet about the Souls games being one of the works of art to discern what it actually feels like to live under capitalism. There is the obvious push and pull between triumph and despair, both of which will fade long after you decide to beat one or rage quit it forever. But there is also the joy of discovery, the joy of losing 40,000 souls early on in a playthrough, the joy of overcoming the limitations we place upon ourselves because society tells us things must proceed a certain and linear and normal way. I consulted Fighting Cowboy's guide a lot when playing Demon Souls, but I am proud to admit I beat the Ritual Path and the Storm King without any help. Over a 4-hour play session, I took what I learned from the Souls games and applied it. It wasn't always graceful. It was oftentimes despairing and frustrating. It was also oftentimes joyful and deliriously thrilling. For me, this was the moment I beat a Souls game. I overcame the limitations I had placed on myself. I decided to trust in my intuition. It is true that at the beginning of mastering a Souls game, some memorization is required. Memorization of attack moves, enemy placements, and cheap environmental hazards. But through repetition and a little leveling up, you begin to enter a flow state where you can take a few hits and keep trucking onward. There is absolutely nothing normal or natural about our current conditions. For so long, Western game critics have tried to preserve one thing about video games, that they should be fun and mindless escapes from our banal reality. But to me, that rings false and hollow. Video games aren't just about having fun. They are exciting, relaxing, joyful, but also insufferable, scary, and delirious. When I got married and decided to have children, I initially thought I wouldn't be able to play video games anymore. But part of being an adult is still being able to take joy in the things you do love. You just have to learn how to manage your time better. A spiritual YouTuber my wife follows once said, "You don't have to do anything in life. You get to do things in life." I rolled my eyes at this, but when so much of life is already about inevitable suffering, do we really need to tack on any more meaningless suffering? Like the gatekeepers of the series who claim you haven't truly beaten one of these unless you do so in a specifically torturous and joyless way. That is not what the Eternal Return is about. That is life-denying slave morality. The online component of Elden Ring and the Souls games more generally harkens back to the communication between Japanese fans of Dragon Quest in the 1980s. Miyazaki got his idea for online multiplayer when he found himself driving up a snowy hill. Gravity had failed numerous cars that were sent stumbling downward. Miyazaki and the unfortunate drivers helped one another push each car up to the top, giving him a tremendous sense of accomplishment, but also community among strangers. He wondered if the person at the very bottom of the hill ever made it to the top, and thus the Souls genre was born. In preparation for this video, I played the opening hours of Dragon Quest III. Dragon Quest is one of Miyazaki's favorite game series. I wrongly believe the series to be straightforward and childish. Dragon Quest III opens with the game asking you to answer questions about yourself as honestly as possible. I gave it my real name and my real birthday. When you're given control, your first task is to push a boulder for an old man like your Sisyphus. He grants you money for doing this, but then I noticed I could keep pushing more boulders, not only earning more money, but seeing a visual accumulation of all the boulders I had pushed. After the sixth one, I decided to talk to the old man. Once I did this, the boulders weirdly stopped accumulating. It was as if the game knew I was trying to exploit it, and because of that, I stopped seeing visual progress. Dragon Quest III allows you to customize who is in your party in a way something like Final Fantasy has never done. I chose to make my wife as a monster wrangler. She could be both incredibly dangerous and reckless with the auto battle turned on, which I loved because it felt like something she'd do in real life. I was immersed in a way I'd rarely been in a video game. We even level up simultaneously. When we reach the town of Ashram, there is a prostitute outside of a brothel who beckons you to come inside and sleep with her. I couldn't believe I was being asked this in a Dragon Quest game, one that predates Mass Effect by 2 decades. As much as my curiosity wanted to say yes to this woman, my wife was standing right behind me. I'd be insane to not only cheat on my wife, but cheat on her as she was standing right outside the brothel waiting for me. So, like an adult, I said no and I moved on. Being in Demon Souls didn't make me an adult. The reason I finally mustered the nerve to beat a Souls game was after I watched Noah Caldwell-Gervais' 5-hour video essays on the Souls series. He, like me, is a stoner type who possesses pretty slow reflexes, but the Souls games reward slow and strategic gameplay. Once you understand this, you start seeing the game differently. It teaches you patience and curiosity, which are the 2 most essential qualities to have as an adult, because without them, you will never understand how joyful of a privilege it is to be a responsible adult, despite what limitations the world might impose upon you. Because even when you feel worthless, the eternal return is always already there, waiting to affirm your redemption. Thanks for watching.
I view it as a challenge to self-creation. It is, as it were, a question that Nietzsche poses to you, to live a life so interestingly, so beautifully, so perfectly lived, that you would be willing to say yes, as Nietzsche says, to fate. To say, I love fate. I love the place where it's put me. I love even my vices, you know. This isn't about going back and fixing that up. No, I love even my vices enough to want to repeat the performance that I did this time again and again and again. And of course you can't